My family humiliated me on my birthday in front of all the guests, so I stopped funding them. Hello, Reddit, throwaway account for obvious reasons. Not that I think my family would ever find this, they assume I'm too technologically inept to navigate anything more advanced than email. They're not entirely wrong. My middle son, Curtis, helped me set up this account years ago. I barely used it. But tonight, I needed somewhere to speak freely. I turned 50 last week. 5 decades of keeping my head down, paying the bills, doing the right thing even when it was thankless. I've worked for the same architectural firm for 27 years. Started as a draftsman right out of trade school, and through hard work and loyalty, I made it to senior project coordinator. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, honest, and it kept a roof over our heads. I've never been someone who made a fuss over birthdays. Usually I grab a sandwich from my favorite deli and maybe a beer with my friend, Walt. Nothing extravagant. But something about 50 made me think, maybe this one should mean more. A small celebration. Some recognition. I divorced my ex-wife, Lydia, nearly 9 years ago after a 20-year marriage. We tried. Or at least I did. She was always searching for something more meaning, more excitement, more attention. Over the years it was one hobby or lifestyle change after another. Pottery classes. Cycling retreats. Vegan cooking workshops. Eventually it was hot yoga and self-help seminars. That's where she met Decker. Yes, Decker. The man she left me for. We have 3 sons, Curtis, 28, Marshall, 25, and Glenn, 22. They were in their teens when the divorce happened. Lydia was always the fun parent, she baked cookies, let them stay up late, planned spontaneous trips to amusement parks. I was the one who said no to the extra video game console, the one who spent weekends fixing leaks, managing bills, and grocery shopping. When the marriage ended, they naturally gravitated toward her. I didn't blame them. She had charm and energy, and I was just tired. I tried to stay connected. Birthday cards. Weekend breakfasts. College visits. It was like applying for a job I never quite qualified for. Every interaction felt like an evaluation I wasn't passing. A week before my birthday, Curtis called me out of the blue. Said they wanted to throw a party. "You've done a lot for us, Dad. We want to show you we care." I was floored. This was more warmth than I'd heard from them in years. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd reached a turning point. I even bought a new button-down shirt, navy with a fine white stripe. A sales clerk said it brought out the gray in my beard in a distinguished way. The party was scheduled at this trendy little event space, a renovated warehouse turned taproom, run by Marshall's college roommate. You know the type: exposed ductwork, Edison bulbs, craft beers with names like Lost Compass and Mango Eclipse. I arrived early, wearing that new shirt, after spending the morning scrubbing the kitchen and trimming the hedges even though the party wasn't at my place. Force of habit. There were about 30 people. Some of my extended family, a few old colleagues, some of the boys' friends. Lydia was there too, which surprised me. She was dressed impeccably, of course. She always had an instinct for dressing just right. Gave me one of those quick, polite hugs, the kind you give someone you used to work with, not someone you raised a family with. Despite everything, I tried to enjoy myself. I made conversation. Laughed at small jokes. My friend Walt had driven 2 hours just to be there. My coworker Donna and her husband, who I occasionally golf with, also came. I nursed a pint of some kind of grapefruit-infused beer that tasted more like soap than anything else, but I smiled through it. Curtis introduced me to people, Glenn brought me appetizers, and for a while I let myself believe the story I'd always hoped for, that maybe they'd started to see me again, not just as the guy who'd messed up, but as their father. Around 7:30, Curtis stood up with a glass of sparkling cider and clinked it with a spoon. He said they'd put together a little something for the occasion. "I know our dad isn't big on being the center of attention," he began, "but tonight we wanted to show him just how much he means to us." Applause. A few cheers. Someone dimmed the lights, and a projector screen lowered from the rafters. I expected some baby photos, maybe a montage of me at soccer games, me grilling in the backyard, me asleep on the couch with the dog. That's the kind of thing people do at milestone birthdays. But that's not what I got. What followed was a 20-minute presentation, I hesitate to even call it that, titled "The Missteps of Edwin Wallace, A Father's Journey Through Regret." Yes. My full name, front and center, in bold white letters. Lydia narrated it. I wish I were exaggerating. She spoke in this low, documentary-style voice, guiding the audience through every so-called failure of my adult life. Slides showing the old car I bought when we were strapped for cash. Pictures of the backyard deck I never finished because I had taken on extra shifts. Mentions of job promotions I didn't get, never mind that I passed them up to spend more time with the boys during their school years. They even included footage from a family camping trip where it rained the whole time, implying I was a poor planner. I'd saved for that trip for months. The room, at first confused, gradually shifted to awkward chuckles, forced laughter. People didn't know what to do. Walt sat frozen. Donna whispered something to her husband, who stared silently at the screen. And me? I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I watched as my life was reduced to punchlines. Then came the ending. Curtis, Marshall, and Glenn each took turns on screen. We've decided, Marshall said, to change our last names. Starting next month, we'll be Wallace in memory only. Lydia nodded solemnly. It's time we stop pretending he's someone to look up to. There was no applause. There was no laughter. There was just a stillness, an unbearable weight in the air. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. This wasn't a celebration. It was a carefully orchestrated goodbye. And not the kind where people hug and cry and promise to keep in touch. This was exile. I stood up. Thanked everyone for coming. And I left. Got in my car, my modest 2014 sedan Lydia once mocked as a vehicle built for giving up, and drove home. Sat in the living room with my old mutt, Chester, his head on my knee, and stared into the darkness until morning. I didn't cry. I just went quiet. Since then, my phone has been buzzing with messages from all three sons. Apparently, they need my signature for the legal name change. Lydia texted me too, asking me not to drag this out. The irony. They thought I'd go along like I always have, silently, politely, without protest. But they've forgotten something. I may be quiet, but I am not weak. And I remember everything. For the first few days after the party, I went silent. I didn't answer the calls. I didn't reply to the messages. I didn't even open the emails. Chester, my dog, started pacing every time the phone vibrated. Dogs can sense tension. Even old, slow ones with cloudy eyes and stiff joints. He stayed close to me, his ears twitching every time the buzz of another incoming call interrupted the quiet. I didn't eat much, mostly cereal and coffee. I couldn't sleep either. I called in sick to work for the first time in over 3 years. My supervisor, Terrence, was surprised but didn't push. I think I just said something like, family stuff. That's all I could muster. On Monday morning, Curtis sent me a message that finally cut through the fog. It said, "Hey, Dad. We just need your signature on a few documents to make everything official. Can we count on you to do the mature thing?" The mature thing. That phrase sat on my chest like a brick. They wanted me to make it official. To sign away my name, my legacy, my connection to the people I raised. The people I stayed up late for during flu seasons. The boys I coached in Little League and taught to change a tire. The ones who used to wake me up early on Saturdays to make pancakes and watch cartoons. And now I was being asked to vanish. Neatly. Quietly. Do the mature thing. I closed the message and stared at the floor. My glasses fogged up, though I hadn't been crying. I'd spent the better part of my adult life sacrificing time, money, rest, for people who had decided I was unworthy of the very name I gave them. And that was when something changed. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even speak aloud. But I felt it. A shift. I would no longer beg for a seat at the table I helped build. I would no longer subsidize the story they told themselves about who I was. I began to plan. Here's what most of them don't know: in the years since the divorce, I've been quietly supporting all three of them financially, even after Lydia and I split everything down the middle. Curtis, the eldest, the planner, the one who arranged the party and the video, he and his wife, Natalie, live in a suburb outside Jackson in a house much too large for their income. Every month, I've been depositing $1,000 into his account, money he told Natalie came from a small inheritance. I never told Lydia either. I did it because they were expecting a child and had fallen behind on their mortgage during the pandemic. I helped because I thought that's what a father does. Marshall, my middle son, is the one who called me childish in his voicemail. He's the most charismatic of the three, always has been. But what most people don't know is that Marshall has a problem. A gambling problem. It started in college. I found out when he called me one night, years ago, sobbing after losing 3 months' rent on a betting site. I sent him the money. Told him to delete the apps. He promised he would. He didn't. In the last 2 years alone, I've paid off over $12,000 in debt for him. Quietly. Without judgment. Every time, he said, "This is the last time, Dad." Glenn, my youngest, is still in college, State University, studying environmental sciences. He's smart and kind, but not as assertive as his brothers. When Lydia said she'd handle tuition in the divorce settlement, I agreed. But when the time came, she told him there had been a mix-up in her savings. That's when Glenn came to me, ashamed. I've been covering his tuition, his books, and half his rent ever since. He sends the occasional thank you text, but never anything more than that. They all took from me. Quietly. Consistently. And I let them. Because I thought that was love. But what they did at that party, that wasn't a cry for attention or an awkward joke gone wrong. It was cruel. Calculated. They didn't just hurt me. They erased me. So, I decided to respond. I started by calling each of them back, once. I left short voicemails. For Curtis, "Hey, son. Let's talk soon. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe a dinner? Just the family." For Marshall, "I got your messages. I want to make this right. Let's sit down and talk." For Glenn, "Hope school's going okay. I'd like to talk about what's next, for all of us." Each of them replied quickly. Too quickly. Curtis said he'd find a restaurant and set up the reservation. He chose a place near his home, high-end Italian, the kind where water comes in glass bottles and you have to ask for a real menu instead of a QR code. Dinner was scheduled for Friday. In the meantime, I got to work. I downloaded my banking history for the last 3 years. I organized the transfers, monthly deposits, tuition checks, Venmo payments. I took screenshots of the late-night texts from Marshall asking for help. I saved receipts, email threads, even my correspondence with the bursar's office at Glenn's school. Then, I compiled it all. 4 folders. 1 for each of them. And 1 more for Lydia. Friday came. I dressed plainly, an old gray sweater, slacks with a bit of fray at the heel. I didn't shave. Didn't comb my hair. I wanted to look worn out. Small. Sad. They were all there when I arrived. Lydia too. Natalie had stayed home with the baby. Curtis stood to greet me, gave me a one-armed hug. Marshall offered a stiff nod. Glenn looked guilty before we even ordered appetizers. Lydia looked poised, her smile tight. Dinner was light, linguine, salad, too expensive sparkling water. Small talk. Curtis talked about work. Marshall cracked jokes. Glenn asked about Chester. No one mentioned the video. Until dessert. That's when Lydia leaned forward and said, "Edwin, we know the last week has been hard. But I think we can all agree it's time to move forward. Right?" Curtis nodded. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Dad. Honestly, we thought it was time to address some things." "You mean publicly shame me," I said, calmly. They shifted in their seats. "It was meant to be therapeutic," Marshall said. "Tough love." I nodded, as if I understood. As if I forgave. "I brought something for all of you," I said. I reached into my bag and placed the folders on the table. Each had a name on it. They looked confused. Curtis opened his first. Inside was a printed record of every payment I had made toward his mortgage. Nearly $36,000, in total. I told him I wouldn't ask for it back, but I also wouldn't be helping again. Marshall opened his next. His face paled as he flipped through records of every wire transfer, every emergency Venmo labeled "last time, I swear." At the back of the folder was a login to an online support group for gambling addiction. "Your choice," I said. "But I'm done funding the problem." Glenn's folder held confirmation of his final tuition payment, one last act of fatherhood before I stepped back. I made sure he wouldn't be dropped from classes. But I wouldn't be paying for rent, books, or anything else going forward. Lydia reached for her folder. Inside were dated photos and messages. Proof of her relationship with Decker, long before she asked for the divorce. Photos I had never used in court. Letters from the counselor we had briefly seen, confirming that I had requested reconciliation and she had already moved on. She closed the folder silently. None of them spoke. Not right away. I looked each of them in the eyes and said the only thing that felt right. I have always loved you. But I will not let you treat me like I'm disposable. I stood up. Put on my coat. You're welcome to stay and finish the meal. The bill is already paid. And then I walked out. That was 3 nights ago. They've been calling, of course. Curtis left a message saying I was being dramatic. Marshall told me I was lashing out. Glenn texted me 3 times, just asking, can we talk? But the best message of all came from Lydia. It simply read. You're not the man I thought you were. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a compliment. After the dinner, the silence that followed was not peaceful, it was heavy, buzzing with all the things unsaid. Messages trickled in, starting the very next morning. Curtis left me a voicemail saying I was being cruel and vindictive. Marshall texted, wow. You really blindsided us. Glenn's message was quieter, Dad. I didn't know everything. Can we talk sometime, just the 2 of us? Even Lydia tried calling. Twice. I didn't pick up either time. But I listened to each message. And then I waited. Waited for the realization to sink in, that I was no longer willing to prop them up, financially or emotionally. They had built a version of reality where I existed only to be tolerated and withdrawn from. When I quietly removed my part in that equation, the structure began to tilt. Meanwhile, I did something simple but long overdue, I began living for myself again. It wasn't some big moment. It started with the kitchen. There was a corner where the wallpaper had been peeling for years. I stripped it, patched the drywall, and painted it a warm sage green. I pulled up the worn rug in the den and replaced it with hardwood panels I'd kept stored in the garage for nearly a decade. I bought new curtains. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I liked the way the morning sun filtered through them. And Chester, my old loyal companion, seemed to sense it too. He started sitting in the hallway again instead of hiding under the table when the phone rang. I started waking up earlier. Not because I had to, just because I wanted to. There was a walking trail near the river I hadn't been to in years. Lydia always said it was too mosquito-prone, and the boys never had time. But I started going again, just me and Chester. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, sit on the wooden bench overlooking the water, and for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for life to happen. I even dug out the old plans for a bookshelf I'd once started designing, a real piece, not some pre-drilled kit. Something with dovetail joints, made from walnut. I'd always said I'd build it when things settled down. Well, they had, not in the way I'd imagined, but with a clarity that came from absence. It was on one of those walks, sitting on that riverside bench with a notebook in my lap, that a thought struck me. They had tried to erase me. But what if I erased them, not out of anger, but with finality? Not literally, of course. But what if I truly closed the chapter, no door left open, no financial back channel, no secret lifeline? Could I live that way? Would I be free? That's when I started planning phase 3. I went to the courthouse the following Monday and requested the paperwork for a legal name change. I had to sit with it for a while, the idea of giving up Wallace. Not because I was ashamed of it, but because I no longer wanted to wear something others had chosen to tarnish. My mother's maiden name was Hollis. A strong, simple name. She had raised me alone for most of my childhood after my father passed. She'd worked 2 jobs, never remarried, and taught me everything I knew about persistence and integrity. I filled out the forms and paid the fee. In 6 weeks, I'd be Edwin Hollis. They didn't want my name. They wouldn't have it. And I wouldn't either. I wasn't running from who I was. I was claiming who I'd always been. Around that same time, a woman named Audra messaged me through a local hiking group on Facebook. She'd seen a photo I posted, me and Chester at the river bend, and commented on the lighting. Turns out she's a high school English teacher who does amateur photography on weekends. She was kind. Sharp. Asked good questions. We started meeting for coffee after our respective walks. At first, just casual chats. She brought Chester a homemade biscuit the third time we met. I don't know who fell for her faster, me or the dog. Audra was divorced too. 2 grown kids. One out west, the other in grad school in Oregon. Unlike mine, she said, they still called her weekly. I just never tried to be their best friend, she told me once over coffee. I tried to be their compass. That line stuck with me. Compass. Not caretaker. Not lifeline. Not punching bag. A quiet, steady point on a map that doesn't chase but also doesn't disappear. I liked that. A lot. A few days after the paperwork was submitted, I got an unexpected call. Glenn. I almost didn't pick up. But something in me said I should. Dad, he said. I saw the stuff in that folder. I didn't know you were paying that much. For school. Rent. Everything. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence settle. I wasn't trying to be cruel, he continued. I think I just went along with what Curtis and Marshall wanted. I didn't think about what it would feel like to you. Still, I said nothing. Then, quietly, do you still want to change your name? I don't know, he said. I haven't sent the paperwork. I've been thinking about it. I guess. I just want to understand why you didn't tell us you were doing all that. Because that's what a father is supposed to do, I said. Quietly. Without needing applause. He was silent. Then he said, can we meet sometime? Not with everyone else. Just you and me. I agreed. Because the truth is, of the 3, Glenn still has a chance. Meanwhile, the fallout continued. Curtis left a string of frantic messages after his mortgage payment bounced. He asked if I could just help one more time until he refinanced. Said Natalie was having anxiety attacks over possibly losing the house. I didn't respond. Marshall's tone, however, changed completely. He called me spiteful, ungrateful, vindictive. Said he hoped I enjoyed destroying the family. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. Lydia, perhaps most surprisingly, stayed silent. At least for a while. I think she realized the photos in that folder were not meant to hurt her, just to remind her that I had let her go quietly once before. I wouldn't do it again. 2 weeks later, I sent one final group message to all 4 of them. Family meeting. This Saturday. Noon. My house. No guests. Come hungry. That's all I said. I didn't explain. I didn't ask for permission. But I knew they'd come. Because when a foundation shifts, people scramble to find solid ground, even if they were the ones who cracked it. Saturday came with a clear blue sky. I woke early, made coffee, and sat with Chester on the front steps while the sun rose. It was the kind of peaceful morning that used to make me feel guilty, like I should be doing something productive. That guilt was gone now. I had done more than my share. At around 9 a.m., I started prepping the house. Not out of obligation, it just felt right. I vacuumed, straightened the bookshelf I'd built weeks earlier, laid out fresh towels in the guest bathroom. I even placed folded napkins beside the plates I'd lined up on the dining table. I ordered food, their favorites. Curtis liked beef lo mein. Marshall was all about General Tso's chicken. Glenn loved crab rangoon. Lydia had always favored hot and sour soup. It cost me close to $100, but this time it wasn't out of guilt or desperation. It was part of the plan. The final step. They all arrived within 15 minutes of each other. Lydia came first, on time, as always, wearing a blazer and carrying a bottle of wine. She looked surprised when I didn't invite her in immediately. I let her stand on the porch until the others showed up. Curtis was next, dressed like a banker off duty. He gave me a tight smile, eyes scanning my face like he was trying to figure out who I'd become. Marshall trailed in behind him, looking rumpled, phone in hand. Glenn arrived last, alone, quiet, with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the floor. I let them in wordlessly. The food was already on the table. I invited them to help themselves. They did, exchanging glances like unsure students entering the principal's office. We ate mostly in silence, the occasional attempt at conversation falling flat. Lydia tried asking about work. I answered with a nod. Marshall commented on the bookshelf. I just said, made it myself. Once everyone had settled in with their food, I stood up and moved to the living room, picking up the remote. I have something I'd like to share, I said. Their faces shifted. Curtis narrowed his eyes. Lydia's lips tightened. Glenn leaned forward slightly. I turned on the television, connected my laptop with an HDMI cable, and opened a video file. It was the presentation, the same video they had played for me at the party. I'd requested a copy from the event space's manager, claiming I wanted it for keepsake reasons. He sent it without question. Now, here it was, projected across my screen, all 16 minutes of it. Every sarcastic commentary, every staged mistake, every ounce of performative mockery. Lydia's narration, calm and cold. The boys' scripted lines about changing their names. The laughter from the crowd. No one laughed this time. Curtis kept his eyes on the floor. Marshall tried to maintain a smirk but failed. Glenn looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Lydia shifted uncomfortably, her arms crossed. When the screen faded to black, I let the silence linger. Then I pulled out 4 folders from a drawer. Each with a name written in black ink. Curtis. Marshall. Glenn. Lydia. I handed them out one by one. Each folder contained the same documents I had given them during our last dinner, only this time, with more detail. Payment histories. Screenshots of text messages. Bank transfer confirmations. Letters from financial institutions. Everything I had given, and everything I was walking away from. Curtis flipped through his, then looked up. You didn't have to do all this, Dad. I did, I said. Because you wanted to erase me. So now you can see exactly what you're erasing. Marshall didn't open his. He just muttered, unbelievable, and pushed it aside. Glenn read every word. And Lydia, she waited until she got to the photos. The ones from before our divorce, of her and Decker, time-stamped and clear. I had kept them for years, untouched. Never showed them in court, never used them as leverage. I had chosen to protect her for the sake of the boys. Not anymore. She closed the folder without saying a word. Then I handed out a 5th folder, thinner, official. My name change, I said. Effective as of this morning. They stared. I've gone back to Hollis. My mother's name. Curtis spoke first. You're actually serious about this? I've never been more serious. Marshall leaned forward. So what, this is revenge? Some elaborate way to punish us? No, I said calmly. This is closure. They didn't know what to say. Lydia finally broke the silence. This isn't you, Edwin. You've never been this, cold. I've always been kind, I said. That's different. I stood. Chester, who had been lying near the fireplace, got up and stretched. You can stay and finish the food if you want. But there's nothing more to discuss. The accounts are closed. The support is ended. The name is gone. I wish you all well, truly. But I won't be part of this story anymore. As I walked to the door, Curtis stood up. Where are you going? I have a lunch date, I said. And a life. That afternoon, I met Audra at a small park just outside town. We walked Chester under the old oak trees, talked about books and trails, and she took a photo of the 3 of us, me, the dog, and herself, framed by golden leaves. I didn't post it online. I didn't send it to anyone. It was just for me. It's been a month since that day. Glenn called once. We met for coffee. He apologized, sincerely. He said he didn't understand the depth of what I'd done for him, and how much he had taken it for granted. We've talked a few times since. Slowly. Carefully. I don't know what the future holds, but I haven't closed the door on him. Curtis hasn't reached out again. Marshall sent a long, angry email. I archived it without reading. Lydia hasn't made contact since that day. Audra and I have continued to see each other. Slowly. Honestly. She brings a peace I forgot was possible. I've started woodworking more seriously. Built a new bench for the front porch. Installed shelves in the garage. Even took Chester on a weekend trip to the mountains. My doctor says my blood pressure is lower than it's been in 10 years. I'm still me. Just not the version they kept trying to reduce. And next year, on my 51st birthday, I'll take a quiet hike, maybe with Audra, maybe alone. Either way, it'll be the first birthday in decades where I decide how I celebrate, not who I need to prove myself to. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.